You know, the UK pub industry is notoriously tough. We're talking tight margins, super long hours, and you're always up against these giant corporations. So what if I told you one company seems to have completely cracked the code? I stumbled across some numbers that they don't fit the story we're always told, and I absolutely had to know what was going on.
So let's start with just one number, 79%. In the latest big industry survey, that's the satisfaction score a pub company got from its own landlords. Now, in a business that's pretty famous for conflict, 79% isn't just high, it's a total anomaly, which kind of makes you wonder.
How on earth did one company manage to become the most loved in the business? Seriously, what are they doing that the big guys aren't? This whole thing feels like a real underdog story.
Well, the company behind that number is Admiral Taverns, and they've set themselves up not as some faceless corporate giant, but as a community pub champion. And as we're about to find out, that is way more than just a catchy marketing slogan. So who are these guys? Admiral runs over 1,500 pubs all across the UK, but here's the key to their whole strategy. Instead of chasing after those high-rent, high-turnover pubs in the city centers, they focus on what they call community-driven boozers. You know, the local pub that's right at the heart of a neighborhood.
Okay, so what is their secret? Let's actually break down this Admiral winning formula. Because it's not just one thing, it's a whole mix of approaches that seem to be genuinely clicking with the people who are on the ground, running these pubs day in and day out.
When you really dig into what their landlords are saying, it all seems to boil down to these four things. It's not just that big picture community focus. It's the real nuts and bolts. Flexible contracts, fair rent deals, and then there's this one thing that comes up again and again, having business development managers, or BDMs, who actually help you build your business.
And check this out, this quote just perfectly illustrates that community point. A landlord from the survey said, Admiral actively supported their idea for a weekly lunch for pensioners. It might sound like a small thing, but it shows the company is backing ideas that build real local loyalty, not just chasing sales targets.
And this is a theme you see everywhere. So often, landlords see the BDMs from other companies as, well, enforcers. They're just there to check the numbers. This quote from Reddit really just nails the difference. An Admiral BDM who actually shows up with ideas? Yeah, that's a partner. That's not just a boss.
But come on, this can't be the whole story, right? No company is perfect. To really get the full picture, we have to look at the trade-offs. I mean, what are you giving up to get this level of support?
And this is absolutely the key. The very things that make Admiral so appealing to some landlords are the exact reasons others might decide to walk away. It is all about those trade-offs.
So let's break this down. On the upside, you get that amazing community focus, a real supportive partnership, and flexibility. But the downside is a direct result of that strategy. Their collection of pubs is smaller, with fewer of those big city locations. You're still in a tied model, which means less freedom on the beer you can sell. And that community focus? It often means a lower turnover potential. This is about steady survival, not explosive growth.
And don't just take my word for it. This comment from a landlord on Facebook just sums up that trade-off perfectly. They praise the support, but then they point out that Admiral's focus is on smaller, wet-led locals, which basically means pubs that mostly sell drinks, not food. For what they wanted to do, host big events, it just wasn't the right fit. Okay, now for the main event. How does Admiral's whole approach stack up when you put their numbers right next to the industry giants? Because this is where the story gets really interesting. Okay, just look at this chart. What's wild here is the sheer contrast. You've got the 2025 landlord satisfaction ratings. Admiral is at the top with 79%, and Green King is right there behind them at a very respectable 78%. But then you look at the other end of the scale. Stonegate, one of the biggest players in the game, is sitting at just 43%. The difference is just staggering.
Yeah, let that sink in for a second. A 36-point gap. In a survey like this, that is not a statistical blip. That is a chasm. It points to two fundamentally different ways of thinking about how to run a pub company and, maybe more importantly, how you treat the people running your pubs.
And if that data was the punch, well, here's the knockout. A direct quote from a landlord in the official survey who actually made the switch from Stonegate to Admiral. Night and day. Wow, that's an incredibly powerful verdict on the two different experiences, right?
So after all that, what does this all actually mean? let's pull everything together and try to figure out the final verdict on Admiral Taverns.
Ultimately, this really comes down to a personal decision. The data and the stories are pretty compelling, but the real question is whether their model lines up with what you, as a potential landlord, are actually looking for.
The best way to think about it is like a checklist. If you're nodding your head yes to wanting a community pub, valuing a supportive partner, and wanting a flexible agreement, and, crucially, you're okay with the trade-offs of a tied model and maybe a smaller turnover, then Admiral looks like a very, very strong contender. But if you're dreaming of a high-traffic city venue with total freedom on your stock, you'll probably look somewhere else.
And this last quote from a landlord, I think it just perfectly captures the core message of their brand. It's that feeling that the company is backing the person, not just the profit and loss sheet. And that right there seems to be what's earning them that incredible 79% satisfaction score.
So it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? In an industry that seems to be all about getting bigger and bigger, about corporate giants, is Admiral's community-first model just a quirky little niche? Or are they actually showing everyone a more sustainable and maybe a more human way to save the Great British Pub? It's definitely something to think about.